Hi there guys, welcome back into my studio. If you're new here, my name's Connor and I am a wildlife artist that specialises in both graphite and scratchboard. So today we're going to be working on this French Bulldog, and this is going to form part of a three-part series where I'm going to talk you through how I would tackle different areas of this French Bulldog. Initially starting with the eyes and then moving on to the ears and then also that very distinctive muzzle and nose. So in this first video, we're focusing entirely on the eyes as it's one of the most expressive areas of any animal portrait. And it's probably my most favourite part of any drawing that I do. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'll start by outlining key parts of the eye with my 2B mechanical pencil. So I'll go around the edge of where the eye itself will be, around the iris, the eyelid, the tear duct, and also just trying to keep those reflections and mark out where they're going to be. Now these marks are kept really light, they're just enough to act as a bit of a guide, but soft enough so that I can erase them if I get something in the wrong place or the proportions just feel a bit off when I start shading. Now we use a mechanical pencil for this, or a clutch pencil as well, just because I can sharpen that point to a really sharp edge and I can clearly define where I want those highlights to be, especially when I'm mapping out on these first initial stages. Now once I'm happy where the outlines are, I start laying down the first layers of graphite. Now here I'm using a B pencil and I'm trying to keep the pressure really light and really smooth, just to try and get that even coverage across the iris. You'll see me taking my makeup brush and gently blending out those layers to try and give it an even texture. Now this softens the marks and it helps to remove that grainy look you get with the pencil strokes. Now I find that makeup brushes are really good for this, they're really soft and controlled and they don't really scratch the surface of the paper that I'm using. But just be careful when you are blending because it does lighten the values a bit, so expect to keep coming back in and redarkening those shadows, especially around the upper and lower parts of the iris and around this pupil. Now I'm always mindful of preserving the highlights at this stage, just because the highlights help give that eye life, and I find that the white of the paper is the brightest white that you're going to be able to get, so I like to try and preserve that. Now you'll see here that I'm starting to deepen the shadows, so I'm starting to use a 2B pencil, and I'm also here and there swapping with a 4B and a 6B for those darkest areas, and that's going to be around the pupil and also under that upper eyelid. Now let's try and build these layers gradually. It's not about one heavy layer, I like to slowly build up that tone between each layer. Now sometimes you'll see me go back in and do a little bit of blending with the makeup brush just to try and smooth out a few different textures, but like I say, I always have to try and go in and re-establish those darks once they've lifted. And this back and forth is what helps give that realistic glassy feel to the eye. Now I've moved over onto this second eye and the process is the same. I use the same tools, initially marking out the outline of that eye with my mechanical pencil or my clutch pencil, and then I use a B pencil for the base, a 2B more for the structure, and then a 4B and a 6B just to add that deep dark contrast. The key here really is consistency. I'm not aiming for a perfect mirror image of the eye because each eye has its own subtle variations in its shape, in its lighting, in almost the way it's looking as well, especially with a French Bulldog. Now I still check that they feel like a matching pair, especially in terms of the darkness, the placement on the paper, and also the sort of general look and tone of the piece. Now here I'm using Strathmore Bristol board for this drawing. It's a really smooth paper. I'm not using the vellum, I'm using the smooth. So it's giving me a really nice smooth texture for these eyes as well. I'm not having to work too hard against the grain of that paper, and that's why I chose that one for this piece. The pencils that you'll see me using do vary, so I'm using mainly Caran 2B, 4B and 6B pencils, but my mechanical pencils or my clutch pencils that you see me use here, that's Staedtler. And again, the two leads that I have in there are a 2B and a 4B. Now I always like to keep these on hand because these are the ones that I keep nice and sharp, whereas my Caran I tend to keep more blunted. Now the Kneadable eraser that I was just using there, I'm using just to pick back out those highlights and just lift some of that tone that I felt was a little bit too dark. So here I'm just going back and forth, and like I say, I'm trying to aim for that consistency between the two eyes, trying to make them look like they're part of the same piece. And now that both eyes are majorly complete, we're going to start now focusing on the fur that's surrounding them, because realistically the eyes never feel fully finished for me without the context of the fur that's surrounding them. Now I've already completed the fur on the one side of the face, so you can clearly see how much difference it makes with and without the fur. So I just wanted to show you how I would tackle that. Now I start with an indenting tool, and that's because I use the indenting technique for my fur, and this presses the lightest fur strands into the paper. Now this is a technique that I use a lot with my graphite work, especially when I want to preserve those very fine light hairs, and it's really good for really short pale fur like this fawn French Bulldog. Now the key here is to follow the direction of the hair growth. Now around the eyes, the fur tends to fan out away from the eyelids and follows the curve of the eye socket. So I take my time with this stage because the indenting needs to be confident and clean, but not too deep. If you press too hard, it can look overly thick and the lines can look overly white that don't look natural. So you can use many different tools for indenting. Here I'm mainly using a blunted dart, but you can use a ballpoint pen with no ink, a fine stylus, or even an embossing tool that you can get off the internet. Anything that can press into the paper without tearing it will work. Now once the indenting's done, I tend to go over that area with a B pencil and lay down a soft layer over that area, and this helps establish the tone of the fur and also lets me see a little bit better in regards to where I'm putting my darker tones. Now I use the pencil very lightly here, almost just dabbing the layers on. Now I'm not pressing too hard at this stage because just like the eyeball itself, I want to slowly build up those tones. Now after the first layer, sometimes you'll see me blend it out again with a makeup brush. Now what this does is it allows me to move the graphite around on the paper and almost push it into those indented highlights. And I'll do that if I want the fur to be softened, or if I want those highlighted indented strands to be knocked back slightly. And then it also makes it easy to add the fur over the top. And you'll notice again that when I'm blending, it lightly takes some of that graphite off the page as well. So I use it sometimes if I've gone a little bit too hard or a little bit too dark, just to try and lift some of that graphite back out again. Now if you don't have a makeup brush, that's absolutely fine. You can use a lot of different tools for blending. You can use blending stumps, cotton bud. You can also use just a bit of tissue paper rolled into a point if you need to. Anything that's just going to help blend that graphite on the paper will work. Now from here you'll see me start to build up the layers of fur across the whole surrounding part of the eye. And the technique here is basically the same as what I've done all the way through. So I'll lay down those initial indenting layers and then I'll go back over the top with my B, 2B, 4B and 6B pencils just to help bring out that darkness and variate the tones. So I'm still following the fur direction here, but I'm now paying a little bit closer attention to the areas where the fur starts to clump or change direction, such as coming over the top of this eye and around towards the side and the lateral aspect of this eye. Now at this point I do like to take a step back and look at both eyes and both areas of fur. It's quite easy to get tunnel vision when you're focusing on one small area, but stepping back helps to check for balance and to check for the tonal values and make sure you haven't gone too dark on one side or too light on another. And I try and ask myself, do both eyes feel embedded in the face? Do they both look like they're part of the same animal? Are the shadows consistent? Are the sizes consistent with the reference photo? Are the highlights in the right place? And does the fur match the tone in the reference photo that I'm using? And this is where you can tweak things a little bit if things feel a little bit off. And it's why we work slowly in layers, because it's a lot easier to lift that graphite back out if you need to. So that's the eye and the surrounding fur almost complete, so you can really see how much of a difference it's made with that subtle bit of fur texture going around the eye. So in part 2 we're going to be looking at how we would tackle the ears, which are a totally different texture and technique compared to what we've been using here. There's going to be a lot of skin texture that we're going to have to work with and a lot of very short fine fur. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've liked the video, and also if you've ever used the indenting technique before, or if it's something that you're new to and you're going to try. Don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on that bell icon so that you'll get notifications whenever I release a new video. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in the next one.